On today's episode of The Dead Life, we're talking about what the dead say heaven looks like. What do you think heaven is? What do we look like in the ethereal? I'm going to share with you what I'm shown in readings. Let me tell you what your loved ones say it looks like on the other side of the veil. You can follow me on Instagram at Medium Allison, on my Facebook fan page, check out my videos on my YouTube channel, or catch me live in Dallas, Texas on February 12th. For more information, go to AllisonDuBois.com. Today, my cuddle buddy and favorite guest, my husband, Joe DuBois, is joining me in studio. Well, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Cuddle buddy. I like that.
Before we get started, I wanted to address Instagram and my umpteenth imposter / catfish. Instagram can't seem to verify me, even though Facebook and Twitter did it over a decade ago. This is very frustrating for public figures because we don't like seeing our fans hurt by a scammer. If you are ever DM'd on social media by me offering readings, it's a fraud. I never reach out for readings. In 20 years of being a professional medium, I've never done that. Ugh, so frustrating.
And it was so hard to jump through all the hoops. And
I know.
I really felt you were targeted because it was a Friday night when they know there wouldn't be customer service available.
Right.
And maybe we wouldn't be looking, but we were looking, and
our fans are always looking. I have smart fans.
You got eyes everywhere.
I do have eyes everywhere. And they were noticing the differences in it's been pulled down as of today.
It's been pulled down. But they'll come back. I mean,
if this is like my third or fourth one in a year. And hey, Instagram, can you verify me so I don't have to worry about my fans getting ripped off by frauds out there in other countries? It sounds like because their English was really bad.
Yeah, it was definitely another country. We have just so when everybody goes to send that email over to us, we have applied for verification with Allison and sent in all the right photographs
for over a
paperwork.
year,
and we've done it
multiple times.
Fingers crossed this time with the up.
Somebody's working there, maybe
somebody's working, but
that'd
also
be awesome.
All the messages that your fans have sent in. And
they did that before.
Dozens,
the fans did it before. I don't know what it takes with Instagram. There's literally cats and dogs that are verified, but a New York Times best-selling author with a television show can't get verified.
One of the hoops you jump through is you have to send your photograph with your driver's license. Right. How does a dog do that?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Maybe they have to be purebred. And
are they verified that they're a dog? Are we verifying they're a dog and a cat? I mean, I think we can see that they're a dog and a cat. So I don't really know what you're verifying about that dog and cat. There is only one grumpy cat in a generation.
And grumpy cats from Arizona.
Of course. I love it. Okay. So I'm glad we addressed that. Very, very good. And I'm sorry to all the fans who messaged me this weekend who went through that, who were being catfished for readings. So this episode I titled Show Me Heaven because I find that people, and I actually want to be able to give them a glimpse into the other side if they can't see it themselves, because I can't imagine not being able to see it. It's spectacular and individual to the person who died. So people say, is heaven like a big white light out there and some ethereal beings step forward for you? Well, possibly. That's not what I see, but I've heard people with near-death experiences talk about that before. So I wanted to share some of the stories from readings I've done on what the other side looks like. It could be anything from, I'll see an old man sitting at a lake with a fishing pole with a boy behind him, which is symbolic of a grandfather and a grandson, or it can be a father and a son. But it's not that they're old on the other side. They show me that so I can identify that they're a different generation than the one sitting next to them.
Right. When you said that, it made me think of The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, where the guy had been dressed like he was in the army during the war.
Right.
Because that's the only way that
he could be identified as that.
But at the end, he went into a Hawaiian shirt. Yeah. And he was like, no, that's not where I am. I mean, I just did that for you.
Yeah. If anybody wants a movie that makes you feel sort of good about how we all affect one another's life, and often for the better. Check out 5 People You Meet in Heaven. That actually debuted the same night as the first episode of the pilot episode of Medium.
Right.
So
kind of perfect.
Yeah, it was kind of perfect. And I've noticed in readings too that I often get them commenting on not just the age they go back to, but their physique. And so I've been getting a lot of men from the early 1980s who say they look good in their tight jeans and they had great hair.
Well, we did wear a lot of tight jeans in the 80s.
Oh, I was a child. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
I was in high school. Come on.
And often they'll be leaning against like an American muscle car,
cool.
which I think is really cool. And so I've seen them go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I've had some 90s, some early 2000s. Unfortunately, when we went into the early 2000s and the Guitar Hero was big. When I bring through a son, they often messaged Guitar Hero, which is a video game. What's the earliest?
You went 50s. Have you had 40s and 30s or?
Interestingly enough, I mean, I have, but usually the ones that I've brought through that go back to say the 30s or 40s, strangely, it'll be somebody from another country. Like Europe,
okay. Yeah, sure.
Where it was beautiful and, you know, they lived on a farm and it was great. We had the Great Depression. I don't know what state
I think that was
England was in Europe at that time.
It was across the globe. They had, but
they appreciated little things. They appreciated making bread with their mom, and they weren't materialistic unless that's part of your personality. I have brought those women through too. I brought a woman named Vicky through once, as you know, and she kept comparing herself to Marilyn Monroe and said she was like a Hollywood star. She could have been a Hollywood star, blonde, and she showed herself in a convertible going down the Pacific Coast Highway, and it turned out to be Anna Nicole Smith. So that was interesting. But it just depends on what their heaven is, and it doesn't mean that's all your heaven is. You decide where you want to be. You can jump around from, I want to be in childhood. I want my mom to hug me. I want to relive my 5th birthday. I want to relive the last Christmas I spent with my grandparents before they passed.
Well, what was your favorite of the people that you've read?
That's okay. I've read 350 people a year for like 20 years, so that's kind of hard to say. I mean, there's always the celebrities are kind of interesting because they'll show themselves on stage playing the guitar or singing. You know, it's just interesting. I really just like the ones that share a period of time with me that I didn't exist. So when they show me an early 1960s like Mad Men cocktail party and how...
Which you've had.
Which I did for my birthday. Yeah, that was nice. They'll go back to that time and I'll have the women comment on clothes being nicer then and better made.
You comment on clothes being...
It's true. Well, I'm just mimicking them. They're right. They were better made back then. And they'll comment on their waist being thin again and down to the detail of the thin belt around their center of their dress, and then how the dress flowed and how their legs look and how they look great in heels. And they're very happy when they cross and they go back to these times where their outside matched their inside. As we get older, our outside doesn't necessarily match how we feel on the inside.
I have a favorite that you've told me before.
Okay.
And there was you were bringing through a gentleman for his wife, and he was talking about a bar that he was in, and your head automatically goes to thinking, oh, well, he's with his buddies. But it turned out it was the first time he ever met her.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It was just such a nice twist. You just felt warm inside and everything.
Yeah.
Not that I've seen heaven. You've told me about it though. Yeah. But of all the stories,
you can picture it.
What a great heaven to live.
It was the first time he laid eyes on her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was beautiful. And I get the guys that come through, and I love it when they say, I'll get a military connection to them. So they carry a military energy to them. And they'll show me, I just did a reading last week where he was showing me soldiers parachuting in, are they paratroopers or something? Parachuting in to, I think it was Germany.
Oh, wow.
And I said, was he in the war? Was he affected by war? And she said he was in World War II. So that's how they'll show it. But then they'll take me to this hole in the wall bar from back in the day after they got back. And all of the men that died in combat are in the bar asking them, what was your life like? What did it look like? And
they're having a reunion.
It's a reunion, and they sit there and they share what each other's learned and seen since then and why things may have had to turn out the way it did. But it gets rid of all the guilt, the survivor's guilt that people feel in life that survive a war or that survive a murder attempt, but their friend didn't. And they carry the survivor's guilt, and it's not what the dead want. You know, they don't want that for us, but it's a human thing to do, and we can't help it. And so when I see the other side, to me, it's the beautiful wedding. I get a tone for the era and where they're living in. Even if their house doesn't physically exist in the physical world here, it exists exactly pristinely as it was back then, and they live in it.
Well, that brings a question up that I wanted to ask. Is you talk about what it looks like, but then you talk about the emotions too.
Yeah.
Is there I mean, you talked about colors being extra colorful.
Yeah, they
and
pop.
Colors you can't see on Earth that they see.
Well, our eyes have never seen the colors the way they appear there.
Right.
Sure.
But is it really is heaven almost a state of mind, or is it a real, like, do you feel?
I think it's a state of soul.
A state of soul. So although you see it, it's not like.
It's your memories. It's your emotion. Well, to them it is. To them it is like that. To us, we're on a different dimension than they are. We're just in a different place.
Right. You say we're thick and
we are thick. So for them, when they are seeing the dog they lost when they were 8 that got hit by a truck that devastated them, that dog is on the farm running towards them when they die, and they're the age they were when they lost the dog again. And it sort of seems to be the way the soul heals us, because any pain, and we hold on to pain because it's the last connection we have to things we loved. So we hold on to that pain, we celebrate it, we make it part of us, which is dangerous because it can physically manifest in you as cancer or some sort of illness. So you have to be careful of that. But when you die, every moment that affected you and hurt you, you go back to that moment, and there's sort of an atonement for that moment that takes place where what died in you, your souls become to get like they're together, I guess, joined in a way in being okay. And all of a sudden the pain slips that we carry in the physical world. Right. It's so hard to explain because I'm trying to come up with words that haven't been created to describe something that we don't always see in the physical world.
Well, and I'm guessing you see what they show you.
Right.
But you don't actually go to heaven yourself. Or
no, they let me see through their eyes and through their soul.
So
their emotions.
That's another layer of So okay, so we kind of have an idea of from what they've shown you and you've told us, what it looks like, feels like, probably is a better term.
Right. No, looks like down to the detail.
Down to the details. Did they talk about how they get from here to there? Or how do they get back?
You mean how they get back here?
To talk to you.
Oh. Yeah. Well, that I do understand completely.
Right. Well, that's your bread and butter. I mean, that's what you do.
I mean, I become them for a brief moment. I'm literally channeling their accent, their verbiage, the way their tone was. I'm seeing through their soul, but to me, it creates a visual. But it's really their soul connecting to my soul that's making it possible for me to become them in that moment.
Wow.
So when I do readings every week and people say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for you. I'm like, don't feel sorry for me. I'm one lucky person to be able to do it because I get to feel how much the dead love the living and how much the living love the dead in that moment. And it's sort of overwhelming. And as a medium, which just means in between, for me, I just feel it's like reading a soul book. every time I do a reading. It's somebody's story, and I love hearing the stories, and I feel a part of them somehow in that moment. But I always remind them and myself, I'm just a secretary.
Right. I've heard you thank the people you read for and the people on the other side.
Yeah.
Thank for letting you into their life.
Yeah.
Like, as being a part of their life, which is, I don't know. It switched my view early on about what you were doing. Cause I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know.
Well, I know it's a very intimate thing. So.
Right. And they share intimate things sometimes for you. Why don't you tell us about that?
Oh God, no. Can't we talk about rainbows and butterflies? Yeah, sometimes there's lingerie involved, straight up. So if they had a love of their life and they had a particularly physical relationship, I have gotten information and readings that makes the person on the other end of the line crack up, or that's in front of me, the living person. And I don't always want to know what it means, because I've been told sometimes what something means, and I wish I didn't know. I wish I didn't know. But I remember doing this one reading for this man, and he was a police officer, and I think it was back in the 70s. He had a girlfriend that was sort of an Angie Dickinson, kind of sultry,
like policewoman.
Yeah,
okay.
And she worked for the police department.
Right.
But they'd always take lunches in Rendezvous.
Oh.
And she had a particular, she was very particular about her lingerie.
Oh.
And so she was showing me what it looked like, and she wanted me to tell him, she wanted me to describe
awkward,
the lingerie.
He's a guy, and
yeah.
Right.
No, he thought it was fabulous. And so I was describing the detail of the gown, and he said, "Yep, I remember it." Yeah, he said that was one of my favorites. And so if you're a young medium out there and you're going to be basically functioning as a secretary to the dead, as an in-between, then you're going to have to get comfortable with seeing and hearing a lot of different things. And you learn a lot, though, at the same time. I think it makes me more colorful with my vocabulary, because Sophia's always saying to me, "Mom, you have the most colorful way of putting things."
You have a lot of great sayings, and it's even more than just being from Arizona. Like, you have a lot of great things.
Yeah.
So we should take just a moment, only just a moment, but people will want to know, does everybody go to heaven?
Okay. People have an idea of what heaven and hell is. I've seen a lot of heaven. I've seen a little of what people call hell. And it really is, it boils down to this: like energy gravitates to like energy on the other side. So people who tried to live a good life that were soulful, they gravitate to each other. And people who didn't have, and it could be biological even in their brain, that it wasn't formed right, or they had damage in the frontal temporal lobe, whatever it may be, that they're not able to empathize with others. And if you can't empathize, you can't love. So when I bring through, for instance, a pedophile that I'll make a connection with, because the client will come in and obviously not tell me that their dad was a pedophile, but I will tap in to his energy, and I'll feel the dark energy, and I'll feel prostitution connected to him, or I'll feel children that he was inappropriate with, and I'll just get that kind of yuck feeling, and I'll describe it. And I've had a couple of clients in the past just get up and say, "I just wanted to know he went where he belonged," because I'll describe them as being around others like them.
I remember that.
They never can
traumatic.
hurt.
And it was
that was very traumatic.
Relatively quick reading, because she just needed to know.
I only got like 10 minutes into the reading, and she just stood up and smiled and just wanted to know he couldn't hurt her.
But good. I mean, good for you in a sense, because you said like energy is attracted to like energy.
Right.
But you have to get attracted to all energies.
I know. I have to become that energy. That's how I profile killers. When I would get into their head,
right,
I have to take on their energy.
And that has to be kind of painful, really. And
it's disturbing.
And I've seen it, you carry it with you.
Yeah.
And process it out.
Well, that's why I spent 20 years trying to work cases and deal with families of people who were murdered. And I had to finally retire, because it takes a toll on you. It builds up. And I saw my girlfriends in law enforcement retiring, and I thought, why don't I get to retire? I don't want to do that anymore. You can only do it so long before you'll burn out or destroy yourself. I find tapping into that sort of person, though, I'm strong enough and I have enough boundaries to pull myself back from them to where they can't control me or infiltrate my thoughts in any ways without my desire to have that connection to get the answers for my client. And it's very rare that I get one of those people, that I bring one of those people through, because the living usually feels safe when that dead person is gone that used to hurt them. Right. And they don't want a connection with them, and they don't want to hear from them. And I would say this to those who have questions about murder-suicide. I find this an interesting question by people. So I've brought women through before who killed their child and then killed themselves. Murder-suicide. Because the husband was trying to take the child in a divorce. I've seen husbands do the same thing. Places, yeah. Sure. So in those situations, what happens is, in the mother's heaven, she goes back to a time before the friction happened, before all of that started building a path that she couldn't turn back from anymore, before she started going down the wrong path. So she'll go back to that time when the things were happy and the baby was happy and the marriage was okay. The child, in reality, on the other side, there's always somebody waiting for them that protects them. So if you hurt a child and you cross, you can go back and relive the memories that were good. But as far as being with that soul, there is a division, because there's an imprint in our soul of not feeling safe.
I'm glad you brought that up about somebody there waiting for the children to come over. And a lot of times we think of it, I mean, even Bugs Bunny had, when he pretended to die, he'd go, "Grandpa, is that you?" Like, this is part of our human experience.
We know
like,
it. Yeah,
we know that's who comes is your family. But you had a reading that there was a boy who was struggling with who he was emotionally, I think even sexually, but he, on the other side, he had never gotten to go to a certain concert.
I know what you're talking about, but it's not exactly that.
Did I mess it up? Okay.
A little bit. It's okay. So I brought a son through for his mother, but thank you for reminding me of that one. That has a good point to it as well. She had bought concert tickets before he died, and he killed himself. And he showed himself in the concert arena, and as he said, with other kids like him. And he was laughing and he was happy to be there. And the mom started crying because she went to that concert after he died to feel close to him. And he was letting her know he was in the arena with her. So it was
right. But and part of that, if I recall, which apparently I don't recall completely right, but I wasn't there. I heard it secondhand,
That's
hearsay, if you will. But
not hearsay. You heard it directly from me.
Okay.
Yes.
He was with, well, and you mentioned others like him, meaning these weren't people he knew in life.
Right.
And that I found pretty profound, because almost every other reading, they were only around people they knew already, or their loved ones.
Right.
So what was kind of different there?
With kids, it's interesting. For him, it's because he was gay and he struggled with that. He lived in a small town, I believe it was in Iowa, and it just not the norm there. He was unhappy. As we know, we've been teenagers. We have terrible thoughts sometimes when life gets tough, and we wonder what our life's going to be and if we're ever going to find true happiness, and some kids give up on the idea of an actual happiness that exists for them out there. He was one of those kids. When he was in the arena, he was in the arena with other gay children, teenagers that had crossed that didn't feel like they fit in. Also early 20-somethings, because I saw some of the people around them. They were a little older, but they were just having a blast. They had their T-shirts on with the singer on the front, and they were taking like pictures, which was weird to me because they had cell phones, like they're taking pictures, because it's something they didn't do in life at that time, and it's what they would have been doing.
Well, and you've talked about 15-year-olds, even 16-year-olds that hadn't gotten their driver's license, that they get a driver's license.
The 15-year-old will come through as 16.
Right.
Because they wanted to be able to drive, even though in life they didn't make it to 16. So. I think that's so interesting. I've also had that happen with 21. Because the 20-year-olds are like, I didn't get to go to the bars. I'm going to do it now. They do that as well. So heaven is whatever you want on the other side. Some people revert to 18 because it's before life got difficult or before a chemical imbalance took a hold of them, or they were super fly looking their senior year and had a ton of girls or guys after them, and they were having a blast, they were popular, and they had their friends around them. They say it never got better than that, and they'll go back to that time. But normally you'll be drawn to a photograph of the person you lost at an age where you just know that's what they look like now. People who found the love of their life, though, often go back to the age they fell in love or they got married because they want to be with them again. Even if they ended up, and this is a very important point, even if they end up divorced later in life because of ego, that neither of them can apologize, neither of them could get past it. They had to make a point, and they always regret that. They always say, I should have tried harder. And so they will still go back to when they fell in love, because what they came to find out is that was the real deal. That was their shot at happiness. Sometimes we take that for granted.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like I hijacked your show a little bit.
No, you didn't.
I know you have a list of questions you wanted to talk about.
I've been processing my readings through you for 20 plus years. So I love that you remember some of the ones that I get inundated with different lives all the time.
You do, yeah.
So sometimes it slips my mind that I did it. And then you'll remind me, and I feel like I'm being told one of my favorite bedtime stories again. And it's interesting. You were talking about how with Bugs Bunny, and he's like, Grandpa, is that you?
Right.
When I had the hospice nurses on, and I'd love to have some more hospice nurses on. So if any of you want to come on for an episode, I call the hospice nurses Angels of the Hospice. Call me at 802-DEAD 811 802-332-3811. Love to hear from you. So they talk about when somebody's about to die that they'll sit up and say somebody's name. Because that person's in the room, and I see the dead in the room because the dead show me from their point of view where they were from, and the hospice nurses are seeing what's going on with the living person. So it's kind of interesting. I'm more with the dead than with the living.
Right. When you're
most times.
There. Right. Yeah.
Well, I am, because they learn, and the living, we're kind of dumb, we just like beat our heads against the wall. I don't know, maybe if I try again, and like it didn't work the first 4 times with that husband, probably won't the 5th.
Pretty much.
We just don't learn. It's not that we don't learn, it's that we don't listen to what our gut and our soul's telling us to do, because we think somehow, and I find this interesting about academics, maybe you could comment on this. Academics think they're smarter because of their cognitive abilities and their vast range of knowledge. And for people who are soulful, we feel like we have answers that we're given from within, from an inner voice. And we think, from our perspective, we know better for us. So and this isn't you, but when you get somebody, for instance, that's a cynic that thinks people that get readings are gullible, how arrogant is it of them to assume that people that get readings are uneducated or that have no common sense? I just find that just very, very offensive that they take that stance. But academics tend to think they're smarter than everybody else.
Well, and even academics, they come in a few varieties. That there are some that truly have that critical thinking skill that any information that comes along, they don't instantly dismiss it just because it wasn't their experience.
Right.
And those people
They're wise.
Are wise.
Yes.
But then you have the people that just instantly dismiss things.
Out of anger.
Out of anger. And that's it, right, out of anger. And it seems...
They're motivated by something.
I've paid attention, and a lot of the people that have the most strong opinions are angry because somebody they love died, and...
They have abandonment issues.
Or they couldn't control the death or the relationship. Right.
Or they didn't love somebody enough to want to hear from them. So if they weren't loved, then love must not exist. Like they just go down this road.
It's often based on other things.
Absolutely. But they use their academia as their weapon against people.
And there's a culture there that says religious as any religion, and they believe in their religion, and they believe it without questioning it. That's the problem. And it's like, if you just take everything and just objectively say, could this, what am I hearing? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And still look
listen
to make
to people's
sure you're not
stories.
Getting,
After a while, you as a rocket scientist said, you threw your hands up in the beginning and said, I don't get it, but it is something real.
Well, if you were tested and you scored very high, 90s in the high 90s%. If you're consistently at that level, then you have to take even the stuff.
Right.
It gets tiring to try to check everything.
I had some impressive readings.
Right. If you're consistently there and it's been shown and proven, it's like, well, then we can rely that everything else is going to be.
It was when I brought through Princess Diana in the laboratory.
That was a really good
and
one.
Didn't know it was her that I was supposed to bring through. I think that's when you.
It
believed.
Wasn't close to when it wasn't that she had just died, so that didn't. There was no reason the person you were talking to didn't have an English accent or wasn't referred to as Milady or something like that. It was,
she was on the other side of a partition.
Yeah, it was just as hard as it can be.
That was really funny though to walk in, and I walked out 5 minutes later because I said, if this isn't Princess Diana, just stop the test.
Right. And they wouldn't even tell you that.
They wouldn't tell me. They said, go wait out in the holding room. And they sent another medium in. And then she walked into the holding room with me. And I looked at her and I said, did you get Princess Diana? And she's like, you got her too? I said, yeah, it was pretty awesome. So I'm never bored with my readings. And it's not just the celebrities that come through that are interesting. The comedians I've brought through, very cool. Yeah. They crack jokes. That's my favorite. But I've even had dads crack dad jokes. And I come out and I tell them to you. And their grown daughters just crack up because they never thought they'd hear their dad tell them another joke.
Right.
Or I've had a lot of these lately, especially, I don't know what it was about 2021, but it conjured the spirits. Like they had a lot to say to the living loved ones. And I had dads coming through and moms coming through all December that would say, happy birthday, baby. And they'd have like a cake with a candle in it, and they'd have the glow of the candlelight on their face and it looked very beautiful. And I'd say they're holding a cake and they're saying happy birthday. And the adult child would start crying, and I'd say, I bet you never thought you'd hear that from them again. And that's what it comes down to. It's the best gift they could give them is one last happy birthday. Because we get hung up on not being able to say goodbye, or our parents die around our birthday sometimes.
Right.
Your dad was buried on yours.
Right. Yeah,
and that traumatized you. So to hear him come through and say happy birthday, I mean, imagine that's a big deal. Right. I got a little teary-eyed. So one of the things I did want to touch on, I had a client last week, and she was really beating herself up about not being able to save her dad. And she was the Scorpio that I read. I remember telling you about this. And I said, I say this from the bottom of my heart. I'm another daughter who lost a dad. I said, I knew my dad was going to die at 67 of a massive heart attack. I sent him to the Heart Institute to be looked at. They said he was fine. I said, my dad died at 67 of a massive heart attack. So what makes you think that you could have possibly known anything ahead of time? Like you were supposed to psychically pick up on a nuance that he was sick when when he didn't know and nobody knew that he was
Right.
sick. He hadn't been diagnosed. And unfortunately, by the time they caught it, he was in the final stages of cancer. And for her, she just watching him go was too much for her. And she couldn't leave him because she was a daddy's girl. She had to stay with him, but it also scars your soul when you stay with them. And I said, you've got to let go of carrying the responsibility of a savior. I said, because as long as you walk through life with a savior soul, you're going to be disappointed in yourself. I said, you have to understand we're human beings. I said, I wasn't supposed to save my dad. If my dad hadn't died, I wouldn't have understood clients and how it felt to lose somebody that they love.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to relate.
And you wouldn't have written that book that turned into Medium.
Don't Kiss Them Goodbye was my first book. I wrote that, and I titled a chapter My Way after my dad. He lived life his way. He was a professional ballroom dancer, and I had My Way played at his funeral by mariachis. It was a lot of fun. My dad would have wanted it that way. I had it catered with his favorite Mexican food. Was it Macayo's or something off Central?
It was Macayo's, and it he had a pinstripe coffin, which was really his style.
That was my dad's thing back in the 70s and early 80s. He always had a pinstriped car.
Right.
And I walked in, and it's a terrible thing to have to do at 30 years of age, to walk in and be his next of kin. But I saw this midnight blue casket with this beautiful pinstriping. I had never seen a casket with pinstriping in my life. And I said, that's the one. That's his ride, you know? So
it suited him.
Yeah. So for the grown kids out there that feel like you should have known, you're beating yourself up. I had a dad once say, stop beating up on my little girl, because they're watching you beat up on the person they love the most. And that is not what they want. So I like to share that with the kids who can't see the other side, that aren't told ahead of time that somebody's going to pass, so they could say goodbye. I got to say all the things to my dad that I needed and would have wanted to say. And really, you want to live life that way. You want to say it while you're alive. Say it every week, every day. Then you never have any regrets. But as far as the funerals go, and I've had morticians on, Cody, he was funny.
Right.
And make it them. Make it about them, not about their death, but about their life. They love to hear the stories about them. That's what they really want to hear, especially the funny ones. My dad, for instance, I stood up and spoke at his funeral, and I said my dad loved two things in life, not necessarily in this order: a fine bottle of red wine and a hot blonde.
That's true.
And so if you crack a joke at their funeral, they know you hear them. They know they're there. And it's the funny ones, the characters, that people miss the most. So I'm all for going through life being pious and doing the right thing all the time. And God bless those people who can, but I'm a redhead. And I'm going to always get in a little bit of trouble, and it's who I am. But I'll tell you, our kids are going to miss it. There's going to be a lot of stories. So for you out there that will lose somebody in the future, make it about them. It's so important. And I always tell people who are grieving, if you die for them, then love them enough to live for them, which is very important. They live vicariously through us. And if you're traveling and experiencing life, whitewater rafting, whatever they didn't get to do, they're feeling it with you. They're experiencing it. They're tasting the food you're tasting. They're feeling your joy. They're laughing. So let them borrow your body for a change. They borrow mine every week when I channel them. And when they die, they want to live vicariously through the people they love the most who got them. So if you have any questions for me that might air on a future podcast episode, call me at 802-DEAD 811, 802-332-3811. Joe, thanks for taking this ride with me and being my favorite guest. I'm sure people will be seeing your handsome face again very soon. Until next week on The Dead Life, I'm Allison DuBois. And to all of my believers out there, don't stop believing.